Hey everybody, welcome to Fanboy Planet. Here, I'd say once again, because back in the fall, I got to interview, right, this is still spring, or it's almost summer. I got to interview Rylend Grant about The Peacekeepers, which was a Kickstarter he had then, but he has a book now coming out in August from Source Point Press called Suicide Jockeys. So welcome, Rylend, great to talk to you again. And so let's talk about Suicide Jockeys, which is
Yeah, great to be here.
I'm going to say you go ahead and explain it.
Okay.
I don't think I did a good job on Fanboy Planet on my article, so go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I thought you did a great job actually, but I'm happy to do it. So Suicide Jockeys is Tokusatsu for the American action movie audience. Tokusatsu for the uninitiated is the Japanese sci-fi action genre that includes shows like Voltron and Power Rangers, but it also includes kaiju movies like Godzilla and the like. And so, yeah, this is, this is our attempt to, we don't think it gets enough cred here in the States. It obviously has its kind of like niche following and its sort of cult following. But we wanted to bring it to a popular audience. And so our book is kind of Voltron meets Fast and the Furious. And so the basic idea is that the Suicide Jockeys, it is this sort of poor, usually drunken, almost certainly mentally ill crew of monster fighting tank and aircraft piloting suckers. 10 years ago, they were kind of the baddest crew, in all the lands. Beat back all sorts of threats. They were for years the only thing standing between us and everything that sort of meant to destroy us. But 10 years ago, this mission goes horribly wrong. They lose a key member, kind of the team, the family's mother figure, and then everything goes to hell. So in our first issue, we meet the team, 10 years after this. It's completely fractured. Everyone's kind of off in their own corners, suffering in their own, sort of awful way. And then this opportunity sort of presents itself to kind of to go back to kind of right that wrong from 10 years ago and sort of bring mom back. And so they have to kind of pick themselves up off the proverbial and literal floors, kind of slap the desperately fractured team together, and go take care of this thing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Kind of a bonkers ride. We're sort of howling at the moon the entire time. We really had a lot of fun with it. I write movies for a living. I've spent about the last 15 years writing action movies, basically for people like Ridley Scott and J.J. Abrams and John Woo and Justin Lin and F. Gary Gray and on and on and on. Hollywood makes about 5 different films these days, and they want you to write them a certain way. I hate to be the guy who's like complaining about getting to write movies for a living, but that got really boring. That got kind of stale. The beauty of comics is you can do anything and everything. As long as it's good, it'll find an audience, And so we went wacky with this thing. I mean, when I started writing comics, about 5 years back, I made a promise to myself that I would never write a straightforward story. If you look back at Aberrant and Banjax and The Jump and some of my other fare in comics, I sort of doubled down on playing with time and unreliable narrators and experimental elements and all that stuff. And we really kind of ratchet that up here because it is a time travel story at its heart. So we can have a lot of fun with that. So.
Oh, that's another interesting angle. I didn't realize that from the previews either. And this is also a book that you are co-writing with, as you're telling me, that with Brad Warner, who spent 10, 12 years working for Subaraya, the company that does Ultraman, or owns Ultraman, does Ultraman, because I almost want to take issue with you that I think or maybe I'm just in a bubble, but the genre is growing in awareness, or maybe it's just that these teams have all figured out how to market directly to me. But I have I have Mego Ultraman figures for the first time in my life, and certainly I've got all these on Blu-ray and Marvel's publishing comics back in that genre. So what is the co-writing experience, and what did you need to bring Brad in for?
Yeah, well, co-writing is a little strong. It's almost
Okay.
we sort of conceived of it together, and I executed. Brad is almost like if I can make a movie analogy, Brad is a producer on this thing. Kind of a creative producer, and so yeah, for the uninitiated there, yeah, Brad is a really well-known author in his own right. So we can talk about this a little more. It ends up being this weird bomb to drop, but I am a ordained Soto Zen Buddhist monk, and Soto Zen is a Japanese tradition, and so because of that, I have a lot of odd connections back to Japan. And they have, my life is a creative life, and so they end up seeping into that. So Brad is somebody I know from the Zen community. So Brad is the author of about a dozen books, but best known as this book, Hardcore Zen, which is, kind of like the American Buddhists, technical manual to a certain degree. And then he wrote some other great books. Sit Down and Shut Up is one that I really love. He got great art on that one too. And so Brad has sold hundreds of thousands of books on his own. He was this he was a punk rocker who kind of got fed up with things here, and he moved off to Japan to make monster movies. And so he spent, as you said, about a dozen years living in Japan, working for Zubaraya Productions, which was a company that was founded by the creator of Godzilla. And they've made dozens of TV shows. But yeah, Ultraman is what they're best known for. So Brad spent about a dozen years as a producer and executive on Ultraman. And so we are an interesting team here. I mean, it's like, I talk about Fast and the Furious meets Voltron. I talk about Voltron for the contemporary American action movie audience. And so we have that covered. I mean, one of my claims to fame is I have written for the directors of 6 of the 9 Fast and the Furious movies right now. So I have that covered, obviously. Brad is kind of our Tokusatsu expert. It's not just that he was a producer on Ultraman for a dozen years. He is kind of a Tokusatsu historian, enthusiast. Like, he knows this stuff backwards and forwards. He knows every little wrinkle. And so while I am making sure that that contemporary American action audience is served, he is making sure that Tokusatsu fans have a authentic experience. And so yeah, it is this, we just had a lot of fun doing it. I mean, we're good friends and we have a lot of the same interests. And so it was fun just kind of getting together and, developing this thing, with his help. And yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say in terms of the popularity is that, I still feel like it hasn't had its like big mainstream due, you know what I'm saying? That Marvel is making an Ultraman comic, but that's coming 20 years too late. It's starting, and part of the problem is that there was this massive IP lawsuit thing going on with the Ultraman property that had it tied up for decades. There was a really kind of duplicitous producer in the Philippines that had this really awful tenuous claim on the property. And IP law in Japan is it's kind of this ugly contradictory quagmire. And so the Ultraman property was tied up for a long time. And after kind of like dozens of court battles, I think they finally slayed that. And so that's how you end up seeing a Marvel comic. And, we have not had why isn't there a $1 billion Ultraman movie that, on the scale of those Marvel movies? You haven't had it yet. You haven't had any Tokusatsu movie like that. And so this is trying to give the whole world a shove in that direction to kind of show you what can be done with it. And it's, I mean, we love it. I love it as much as you do. And I do have the DVDs, but those things are, they're a little hokey. They're a little campy. They're, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
And let's cool it up. Let's make it badass, because this stuff is badass. When we were kids, again, Voltron should be the coolest thing on the fucking face of the earth. Excuse me for swearing. And it's not. But it should be, and it will be. And we're just trying to play our part.
Yeah. So I think you've done a good job summing up the book itself, and you're going to Source Point Press, which I think is a new publisher for you. So what made them the right one at this time?
Yeah, there was kind of a there was like a love affair from afar on both sides with SourcePoint for a while. I just think I think they're a great publisher. You know, it's an odd comparison because of what's happened recently, but you know, they're kind of like Miramax in the '90s. You know, where they're just a really interesting indie voice, and they're making smart books. You know, finding really interesting creators to kind of bring into prominence. And you know, they're tastemakers very much. And they've always stood out to me as such. And so it really wasn't, you know, a matter of like if I would end up, you know, doing something with SourcePoint. It was a matter of when. And you know, I think I met the SourcePoint people for the first time back in 2019 when at the Ringo Awards, when you know Aberrant was nominated for a couple of Ringo Awards, and we ended up winning one for Best Villain and all that. And our table was next to the SourcePoint table, and they were just having a ton of fun over there. And I'm like, I want to hang out with those guys. And you know, sure enough, we found each other afterwards, and we just kind of really hit it off. And just a lot of smart, great people over there. And so we circled each other for a while, and it was about the you know the right timing, the right book. But yeah, this relationship is more than a one book relationship. I mean, I was looking for kind of a new comic home. It's not to say I won't do anything anywhere else, but you know, I've sort of planted a flag over at SourcePoint now, and I think it's going to be a really long and fruitful relationship for both of us. And so yeah, I'm excited to kick things off. You know, good outfit.
And how many issues do you plan on Suicide Jockeys going?
So you know, I think you know, I have this network of creators, and we do a lot of talking over this about like what's the right balance and what's the right way to approach this. The first arc is 4 issues, and I think that is a nice sweet spot. You know, you give people a trade on and see how they respond to it, and see what the reaction is, and see what people want back. My friend David Boer, they've had a lot of success doing this with Kanto. And you know, a lot of people that kind of go this way now. Do it 4 at a time. Do it one story at a time. You know, and so the idea is, I mean, you're going to read this. It's going to be 4 issues, and that 4-issue arc will wrap up very nicely. But as you're kind of wrapping up the drama of those first 4 issues, you're setting up the drama of the next 4 issues, and on and on. You're creating a world. You're creating characters that will support 100 of these 4-issue arcs. So that's what you're going to see. You know, it's kind of the first installment of like this TV show that you want. You know, you want 7 seasons in a movie. You know,
yeah.
So.
And at this point, for me as a reader, I really appreciate these bite-sized chunks because I get to sample. Maybe my weekly budget gets a month rest, and then I go back in. So this hits comic shops in August from SourcePoint Press, Suicide Jockeys. And really looking forward to it. So thank you for taking the time, Rylend, and it's always good to see you. And so thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And I should say it's available for pre-order right now in your comic shop. So it hits comic shops in August, but go down right now to your local comic shop and order. You know, put it on your pull list, the whole 9 yards. If you do not have a local comic shop for whatever reason, you should go to your comic shop. But if you can't for whatever reason, you can go to sourcepointpress.com and check it out there.
Thank you. I was going to ask that. So great catch. All right. Yeah. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet videos. And remember, use your powers for good.